Hey y'all, it's Norty. Uh, First things first, I got a tiny little whiteboard. It turns out you can buy these suckers at Home Depot, and it was like a 3 by 2 foot sheet, and I had them cut it into quadrants, so now I can write on it. Ta-da! So, things I've been doing. Saturday I worked on more of the pathing system for the AI competition. I had it working last time I talked with you guys, but I was still having some issues with performance. So I tried it on a 20 by 40 map, which is kind of the standard size they seem to be using, and it ran in about a second, which is not fast enough. It needs to go faster. When I scaled it up to 40 by 80, doubling the size, it went up to about 10 seconds to run. So that sucked because uh, you only get like 1 second per round to run your AI, and if it takes you 10 seconds to find the path for one unit, then you're just not gonna finish at all. So I turned out there were two major issues. One, my algorithm kind of sucked. So, for example, using the whiteboard, if I wanted to get from point A to point B, it turned out my algorithm was looking at the entire inner box here. So that wasn't very fast to do, and I did a little research, and it turns out that's because actually, when you look at it, assuming this is a square, each one of these lines is actually equidistant from point B, assuming that you can only move in a like a compass rose direction. You can only move north, south, east, west. You can't move like diagonally. So the number of moves it takes to get from each one of these points on this line actually ends up being fairly close to each other. So it turns out that basically it wasn't able to easily decide which one of these to evaluate first. So I did a little research, and a couple of people have come up with some suggestions on how to do this. And what I did was um, basically it mathematically it was called taking a cross product of the vectors involved from one point, getting from one point versus getting to the center point. So if you imagine a point going towards point B here, um, the the angle here forms, if you take the sine of that angle, theta, this becomes the kind of the direction, the amount you are going perpendicular to the direction you want it to go. So basically, I calculate how far off this one of these points on this line is, and add a tiny little penalty for being off of the as the crow flies kind of direction. So by adding that tiny little penalty for doing so, it suddenly allowed me to sort by one, how close am I to the target, and how fast can I get there, and then how far off of the center line have I gone. Now, if you go too far off the center line, it will just take longer to process to that point, but it's going to prioritize items that are along this direction. So that really improved things. So suddenly I was going from uh, 10 seconds to calculate my destination to a tenth of a second for a 40 by 80 grid map. So then I did a little bit more digging, and it turned out I was still using one instance of what is in Python is called deep copy, which when you want to make a duplicate of something, that's a pretty easy way to simply say make a copy of this, but I want them to be two separate copies. In Python, it's fairly easy to point one thing to another and have them actually be pointing to the same conceptual object. So if you modify A, if you say, A is 10 and A and B equals A, then B is now sometimes pointing at the object that represents 10. And so if you modify A, you've also modified B because they're pointing to the same concept. So it turns out I don't like Python in that respect, that sometimes I can't figure out whether or not it's decided to point at a reference, made a shallow copy of it, just two items pointing at the same thing, versus a deep copy of it. So if you call deep copy, it will go and make sure you have made two separate points. However, this is expensive because it turns out deep copy has to do a whole lot of extra integrity checking to make sure that it hasn't gotten, it's not, when it's making a copy of something that's pointing to itself, then that gets complicated, apparently. So I simply removed the last instance of deep copy that I was using, and it turned out I could get away with that without any problems, and bam, I'd shaved my time from, I want to say a tenth of a second to, say, I think it's like 7/100ths of a second. So that's been a tremendous improvement. I wish it would go faster, but for now that's fast enough for my purposes. Maybe I'll see in competition if I have any serious issues. So, and I have another strategy for dealing with it. If it's still being slow, I can kind of work around it, I think. So that's the idea, and that's my whiteboard. Yeah, $8 at Home Depot gets you 4 of these suckers. So long as you ask them to cut it. Or you can cut it yourself, but I don't have circular saw. Other things we've been working on is First Robotics. This Sunday, the day I'm recording this, Sunday, I recorded the... I went to First Robotics meetup today, where they are building another copy of the robot, a smaller practice bot that they can use to practice moving the robot and scooping the robot and making sure the programming works. So they've almost got the robot working. They got the wheels rolling by the time we left. They have the practice robot hooked up. They had the electronics on board. They had the battery on there, although they need to find a way to secure it because it's not actually attached to the robot. We had it up on blocks. So they're running that. They were able to debug some problems with the joystick. It sounds like there's a joystick issue that they're working through. Like one of the joysticks was not allowing them to calibrate the motor controllers, and they found by switching the joystick that they got full response from the motor controllers, and the robot went at full speed. So there's still troubleshooting issues with the scoop. So this year, the game is played with a giant beach ball. Think of it like a large beach ball wrapped in Kevlar. Like an undersized exercise ball. And so you can carry one of these on your robot at any one time. We have a giant scoop on the front to scoop under the ball and try to lift it onto the robot and push it back onto the catapult shooter system. So the scoop is not responding at all. I've looked over the programming. I'm pretty sure the programming is correct. It's just not moving at all. So they need to debug that. They have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to debug it, and then Thursday we're going to regionals. Of course, we can debug it at regionals too, but that would kind of suck. So they're working on that. And Toastmasters, I've got an idea in mind for what speech to do for vocal variety. It's an incident from my freshman year in the fraternity where one of the alumni, who is known as Jake the Cake, some people may recognize that name, I don't know, ended up dragging me out of a game of, otherwise fun game of, I think it was Halo or Left 4 Dead or something, during St. Pat's. and dragged me outside in the cold to talk about brotherhood and what does it mean to you and why are you in my house anyways? Like, what are you good for? So that was it was an interesting conversation. I don't remember too much of it, not because I was drunk. I didn't drink at that time, but because it wasn't really interesting to me. Anyways, I will make up a suitable conversation to exemplify the issues that I had and see if I can demonstrate some vocal variety. So yeah, that's my life last week ish. Well, that was kind of what I did on the weekend, and let's see. Wednesday, I'm planning on taking some training, which is intro to JavaScript, because I've glanced at JavaScript. I've seen a little bit of it, but I haven't actually sat down for to understand it at all. And I'm hoping they will get to prototypes because that's the thing that was buggy. I was not understanding about JavaScript when I worked with it earlier. So yeah, I'm not sure how that concept works in JavaScript. And Thursday, Friday, and Saturday is the first robotics competition, regionals in Kansas City. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I managed to get vacation for that, and I'm looking forward to all 3 days of that. Hopefully my dad can come up too and see them as well. So cool.